You know, Don.
Okay, so a few
Okay.
minutes ago, we adjourned to executive session for student discipline matter. And following consideration and deliberations on an appeal from the superintendent's decision in a student discipline manner, the board determined that the decision of the superintendent should be upheld and sustained and adopted. So we can move on with our meeting. Next, we have approval of the agenda. Any questions? Next, minutes of the previous meeting. Any questions, concerns? Next is communications. I know we received 2 or 3 letters from anybody? Okay. Next is our open session. Anybody want to open session? So I won't go through reading that. All right, unfinished business, we have none, and this takes us to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Jason. We have a couple of guest presentations with us tonight. Is it? So I have Virgil's Wi-Fi or Virgil's Apple TV or Virgil's Zoom.
Go on the Virgil's Wi-Fi first. Make sure you're on the Virgil's Wi-Fi.
Oh, okay. I just see Sweet Home under the Wi-Fi. It's there. So there we go. Okay.
And you should be able to share through Apple TV.
Then go to Virgil's Apple TV. Got it. Okay. I got a code that popped up, but I don't know. Oh, there it is. All right, our first presentation for the evening is from Jeff Stone and Don regarding the capital reserve amendment. So.
Good evening, everybody. Just real quick, wanted to share with you as we kind of get into this. If you remember correctly, at the February 12th budget study session, we broached the subject with you about amending the purpose of our capital improvement reserve fund, which was established in 2017. So Mike, if you could just hit the next slide, if you don't mind. It's really tough to read, but that's the capital reserve fund. And then if you just hit the next slide there. So what we're hoping to talk with you about tonight is first, and Jeff Stone is here from Hodgson Russ, who helped us kind of amend the resolution for tonight, as well as a subsequent proposition on the May ballot. But we're hoping tonight to talk with you about amending the purpose of the reserve fund to allow for purchase of vehicles and equipment outside of a capital improvement project. We would approve it if you're amenable. We would approve it or vote to approve it next week at the March 15th meeting. And then we'd ask voters to first approve that change to the capital reserve fund in a proposition on the May ballot. In addition, to ask them to authorize spending out of the reserve to replace district vehicles and equipment. If you just hit the next slide, Mike. So since we last met, this is, and we worked with the Buildings and Grounds Department. We've worked with the Transportation Department, but these are the items that we are asking to potentially purchase out of the amended capital reserve fund. Remember, again, back in August when we set our tax rates and then established our reserves, what money we were putting into the reserves. We did talk about putting, and we did put in actually $500,000 into the capital improvements reserve fund, specifically for this purpose, designed for this reason. So we're looking at the purchase of 3 Ford F-350 XL plow trucks, at a total of $42,500, or at $42,500 apiece, for a total of $127,500. We'd look to do 4 Ford Transit high roof maintenance vans. Those are to replace the vans that our maintenance department uses at a cost of $42,850 apiece for a total of $171,400. We'd look to do 3 Ford Transit Connect vans at $25,625 apiece for a total of $76,875. That would replace 2 of our transportation minivans that we use and the 1 van for our mail courier. And then we'd also look to do 1 Ford box truck at approximately $50,000. That's for our informational technology department for all of their parts that go back and forth between buildings as they're working. And then the last thing would be a John Deere 8800A terrain cut mower at $73,525 for a total of $499,300. Those are items, all of those items that we're asking to be replaced. All of our vans and plow trucks are from 2006 and earlier. So we're working on vehicles that are pretty close to almost 20 years old. And we've never been able to get them into the budget to replace them. And this is why we suggested this back in August. So that's the quantity and the type of vehicles that we'd want to do. This is, so ahead, Scott.
Are these contract prices that we have to still go
State
after?
contract prices, they're estimates now. Obviously, we would, if things were to change and prices were to continue to go up, we wouldn't spend anything above $500,000.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Can I
So-
ask you on this too? I ordered a van, as you know, November 11th.
I-
It's still not here
I
yet.
do know that you ordered
Oh.
it on November 11th.
How sure are we going to get this? I mean, how quick would we get these things?
It depends. I don't know the answer to that question. We've not started out that yet.
Plow
We
truck
have to
instead.
get, obviously, our equipment still works. We'd like them in place by the time the winter time rolls around. But we would, following hopefully a yes vote on our budget on May 17th and a yes vote on this proposition, we would go about starting that process. So this is the revised, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have picked blue,
Little.
but it is blue, but that's the revised resolution or proposition that would go on the May ballot that specifies the amended change to the capital reserve fund, and B, the specific items that we'd look to purchase. So that's what we're asking you for your consideration next week on May the 15th, or on March the 15th to vote in approval for. So Jeff Stone, who helped us kind of craft everything, is here. Jeff wrote, if I'm correct, you wrote the original resolution back in 2017 and the purpose of the Capital Improvement Reserve Fund. So again, we're just amending it and asking that we're allowed to purchase these things separate from a capital improvement project. Kaylee?
So if the prices do change at all and we can't get all of these vehicles, and then the prices change again, we have to wait for another referendum to buy any vehicles we weren't able to get this time, right?
Or we'd purchase them other ways, yes. Again, as I said to Mr. Johnson, we wouldn't spend more than $500,000.
Okay.
I think I tried to build in a little bit of a hedge in there because I described the prices as reasonable estimates at this time.
Mhm.
And there is, well, you've got your $700.
A little wiggle room.
And so, but there was an assurance to voters that the top number, 500, won't be exceeded.
So I don't know if you have any other questions, but we'd hope that you'd consider this next week, Tuesday, so that we can then get it on the ballot as an additional proposition in May.
And of course, if anyone thinks of questions during the week, they can,
Yep. Be happy to do that.
anybody?
I get no questions.
Mr. Stone, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, be well.
It's nice to be out here again. It's always a pleasure to come out to Sweet Home and with Don and Mike having come congratulations, some old friends on the board.
Yeah.
It's nice to see everybody and to see you guys doing well and some transition happening with the district in good hands. And it's a pleasure to work with you. So you couldn't read that language, but take my word for it.
You can read it on your iPad.
So I got it right here.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Jeff. It was good seeing you.
Good seeing you.
Don't play well. Thanks, Jeff.
Sit for the next.
Yeah, go ahead.
And we have Katie Barilari is here tonight, and very happy to have her here to discuss special education. I know the board had a good discussion at our budget workshop about special education, and we thought this was a great time to bring in Katie and friends, I would say, to support what she has going on in her department. So we're very happy to have you here, Katie.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I also, just want to open by saying, how much I appreciate all the support from the Board of Education, certainly for the Office of Special Programs, not only the past year and a half since I've been in this position, but for all the years that I've been in Sweet Home. It's been a wonderful place to work and have that support. So thank you so much. I also want to just give a special thank you to my colleagues for being here tonight. When I asked Mike, did he want me to present alone or did he want me to bring anybody to present with him? With me, he suggested, that I ask the principals in case there were any building specific questions. So I want to thank you guys for being here tonight. The first slide up here,
Sorry.
thanks, Mike.
Yep.
The first slide introduces you to some of the newest faces of Sweet Home. So these are some of the students that have come to us in the last year and a half. And while I won't specifically get into each and every one of their specific stories, what I'd like to say is that these students, these children are a very strong and resilient group. They're a group that have come through some substantial adversity in many cases, and they're just remarkable. And since they've joined our community, I'm proud to say that they're doing very well in our schools. And obviously that's a tribute to our building principals and staff as well. But just really excited to have them in the district. So getting into the less fun part of what I prepared today, the kids were the fun part. This particular slide helps to show the trend in classification rates. So when it comes to students classified as having an educational disability, on the right-hand side, you're able to see that trend where it's a little hard to see at the moment there, but it was just under 10% in the 1920 school year. And on the left-hand side is the total enrollment. So just what I'd like to point out is that, while enrollment has seen some ups and downs, that upward trend for students with disabilities is, one that we've seen. And that is something that's continuing. So last year in the 2021 school year, I would say we were at about 11% classification. And right now, at this point in the school year, we're probably at 12%. For purposes of comparison, I included the similar data for some districts that have a similar demographic makeup as ours. So this is Cleveland Hill Union Free School District. They're hovering at just over 16%. This is Cheektowaga Maryvale. They were trending right around 15%, and I believe last year they went to 17% of students classified as students with disabilities. Next one is Cheektowaga. They too, hovering around about 15%, and again, seeing an increase last year of 17-ish% in their district. And what I can say for sure is that Chris and I regularly are, in conversation with our neighboring districts, and much of what we're facing in Sweet Home is similar to what others are facing in their districts. We get calls for requests for cross-contract, people looking for placement for students regularly. So we know that they too are seeing some of the same challenges that we're seeing. This slide shows our transfers of students with disabilities. So these are students, the top numbers show the incoming transfer numbers dating back to the 17-18 school year, along with information about the number of students that exit. So I'd just like to point out that, while in certain years we've had more and less, we do, end up at the end of each year with an increase in students with disabilities in the district. In the 2021 school year, or excuse me, the 21-22, this was as of December of this particular school year, we were at 44 transfers with 31 exiting, and that number continues to increase as recently as today. Our office was working with families that are registering with the district. So that is a trend that we do see continuing. In looking at our transfers by location for the last year and a half, we see with regard to the elementary buildings, the highest numbers of transfers are for the Glendale and Maplemere neighborhoods. I do have to note there too that some of those students might be part of our special class programming, which are housed at Glendale and Maplemere. And there's, with regard to the out of district, we've seen an increase in the number of students that have come to us that were previously in BOCES classes and or out of district placements. So these are students with that might, require specialized programming, have substantial needs for which we might not have an opening in our in-district programming, or which, for which their needs might be too great for us to program in district. So I know Don and I were talking about some budget questions that you had with regard to some BOCES numbers, and with regard to these placements, there is an increase there, and a part of that is coming from transfer kids that have come to us from other school districts. So I just wanted to point that out. We do have 2 students that are placed at a BOCES program that were transfers not previously there, but that we weren't able to find placement elsewhere for them. We also have a pretty substantial number of out-of-district placements. So these are students, again, transferring to us that are coming already from out-of-district placements. And we always look to, try to bring them, in district for programming. But that isn't always possible, as I said, due to many of our programs right now are at maximum capacity, and or if their needs rise to the level that they would require programming outside of the district.
Katie? I know in the past, we had actually had some kids tuition into some of the programs in Maplemere, and I think at some of the other schools. Do we still have any kids doing that right now, or?
Yeah, we do. We have, right now, at Maplemere, we have 2 students that are cross-contracted with one with the Akron School District and one with Kenton. We also have a Kenton, young lady from Kenton in the middle school, and we have a young man from Star Point that we cross-contract with in the high school.
Thank you.
Can you
And I
tell me
will
what
say-
those class sizes are? I don't know if you had mentioned it, but what are the 2 class sizes over at Maplemere?
The ratio of the class is 8-1-1.
They're 8-1-1s. Okay. Thank you.
And that's the same at Glendale too. There's 3 8-1-1s at Glendale. And we have 1 8-1-1 in the middle school. We have a 12-1-1 in the middle school. And then we have a 15-1 in high school. So, Mr. Johnson, to your point about the cross contract, so we do regularly receive requests for cross contract. And it's, I have shared with districts, we're happy to, consider students on a wait list if things should become open. But it is, there are some students, but I will say it's difficult. We're looking at some really high enrollment incoming preschool students for, some of those spots. So
Okay.
that's going to be something that, we're going to have to look at a little closer.
Thank you.
This particular slide looks at students who are being initially classified as students with disabilities over the last year and a half. And what I want to just mention too, before looking too closely at the numbers, is that when we talk about initial classifications, we are sometimes talking about students who are preschoolers with disabilities. So when a child becomes school age, he or she is declassified from the CPSE, and then in some cases referred to the CSE as a school age child with a disability. And we saw a particularly large bubble of those CPSE students coming into the CSE in the Maplemere neighborhood that entered school this fall. Additionally, Jim's primary 811 class does have students that were dismissed from the CPSE and initially classified that are from of our other schools as well. This slide gives an overview of the steps in the special education process. And what's not shown on this slide is all the work that goes in before we get to this point. And so I just want to take a moment to talk about the intervention processes that are going on in our schools. So we have student support teams that are meeting regularly to study the students, in the buildings in terms of, not only academics, but their social, emotional, behavioral needs as well. And it is only after students, have been afforded the opportunity to go through multiple interventions and are not making adequate progress that we would consider a referral to the Committee on Special Education. So I just want to point that out ahead of that process. So, and just to highlight, really quickly, I know you guys could all read this if you wanted to, but we have the initial referral for the special education process, and that's again, sometimes comes after that lengthy intervention process. We have students are then evaluated. There are, depending on the student's needs, different evaluations that can be recommended. The committee then comes together to determine eligibility for special education services, and students, school-age students can be classified in one of 13 different educational classifications. So the committee determines if the child is eligible, what the best classification is. From there, an individualized education program is developed for that particular and individual child, always noting that it is our responsibility to do our best to educate children in the least restrictive environment, so the environment most close to their, that of their peers, their non-disabled peers. And then we come back together at least annually. Sometimes a teacher or therapist or parent will request a meeting sooner, but we come together annually to review the IEP and make any necessary updates. And then once at least every 3 years, we will conduct a reevaluation.
And this doesn't even include the kids with 504s.
No, Mrs. Jason, that's a whole nother
I know,
presentation.
Believe me, I get it.
No, this is just special education. This is just the CSE. So, just talking, with Mr. Ginestri, what are some of the trends? What are some of the current trends we're seeing as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic? So I have a couple items here that I've outlined for you. The first one is with regard to students who were previously identified prior to the pandemic. These are students that we are seeing an increased need in some cases for. So these are students that may have come back after the pandemic with some regression, or they may have new or different needs, that have kind of come up as a result of the last, year and a half, the situation there. So that's one thing that we're kind of working with, the need to, in some cases, provide additional services for students who were previously identified. Another trend is the students that are returning to school with increased needs around social emotional areas and trauma in many cases. We've had students that have come to school this year. I'm thinking of somebody in Jolene's building, that child that's never been in school, kids that, Greg, in your buildings, I mean, really all of your buildings, but there's some standout cases in my mind, kids who've never been in school before, and just really struggling to regulate, to be able to get through an academic school school day. And so we've really worked hard. We have teams of people working with single students in some cases to try to get them to a point where they're able to engage academically. And one thing I can say is that the addition of our mental health staff is really just, it's been, so helpful and phenomenal with working through some of these cases. We've also seen challenges. I talked about that intervention process that kind of comes ahead of the CSE process, and we have seen some challenges in that particular area. While we were very lucky to have students in school 5 days, during the remote closures and pandemic period, that came at a cost in terms of taking interventionists out of the classroom. Out of the intervention role and to, become classroom teachers. So there has been a bit of a strain on the intervention process that we've seen recently. Those interventionists have returned to the classroom, but the needs are very great. So we're working closely, our office with the buildings on how to deliver intervention services. And in some cases, we've asked our special education staff to help out with that endeavor. A couple other points for consideration. I don't want to take all night here, but I could keep talking and talking. One thing that's kind of been a standout for us is the situation with our preschoolers with disabilities. So students who right now are in, say, kindergarten or first grade are students that may not have had access to preschool services the way students traditionally had. So most of the services, in fact, all of them, were for a time virtual. And parents were frustrated in some cases with the teletherapy. As you can imagine, it's not the same as having physical therapy or speech or occupational therapy in person. And so this kind of puts these students at a disadvantage for not having the opportunity to close some of these gaps and develop, readiness skills before they came to school. So we are seeing, especially in some of our kindergarten and first grade classes, kids that, would have been further along had they been able to have their preschool services delivered in the more traditional manner. So this is also true when we talk about right now, we're talking about our 4 turning 5-year-olds, and we are looking closely at what they need for the fall. We can in most cases say that we're seeing students with greater needs than we've ever seen. We're noting and planning and we're going out to preschools and we're visiting kids. But there is a strong possibility that we may not be able to program in district for a large number of these students. So that is a challenge that is going to, we're already working on it and it's going to continue to work through this spring and summer. To add to that too, we will compete with neighboring districts for out-of-district placements. So, depending on how other districts make their recommendations, some have already begun to make preschool to school age recommendations in December. So we are working on that. It's really hard though in December of a child's preschool year to know where he or she needs to be in September the following year. But we have our psychologists, we have many of our special education staff working, our building principals working on trying to program for these students.
So when you say large numbers, 10, 20, like what kind of numbers are we talking about?
Let me just get a different piece of paper out here. So we're seeing these bubbles are going to be really big in Bob's building and in Jolene's buildings in particular. So Willow Ridge is due to see, right now we have about 11 students, CPSE coming to CSE. For Jolene's building, there are 18. Maple Mare has 9 and Heritage Heights has 7. So some of these students will rise to the level of needing out-of-district placements, Summit, Aspire, the ARC. Some are students that we could consider programming for in district, but we are likely to, in our Maple Mare primary classroom, have only 1 to 2 openings for the fall. So.
Because we're oftentimes looking, this was at a board discussion, that is it cheaper to keep our kids here and get the necessary services by pulling people in, or to send them out? Is it a wash? Is it, we don't know.
Well, based on the tuition rates that we pay at our out-of-district placements, I think if you're looking at it from a dollar standpoint, it's definitely less expensive to program in district. But we run into some other complications with that, and Mr. Ryan and I have talked about, if we were to propose opening another classroom as part of his program, is there room in the building to do that? And I think you guys know the answer to that. So that's definitely, Don and I recently were having a similar conversation too, also with Mike and Joanne. So we are talking about things, and it's definitely something that I think would be worth further conversation. Anything else on that, Mrs. Jason, or?
No, it's
Okay.
just, so the out of time, and I'm the one that reads the 191 pages.
God bless you
every
for
month.
doing that.
To read those, and so what your staff does is absolutely amazing, because I go through and see the work that each one of them is putting into these kids. I actually wish every kid could have an IEP, because they're so individualized to these kids. So when we're talking out of placement, what is the cost of that? I know it varies depending on where they're going.
You want a dollar amount or asking like emotionally?
No,
A dollar amount. They're always emotionally better with us. I'll say that all day long.
They're our kids. We want to keep them. I'm just trying to get an idea when we do out of placement, what the cost of that.
Yeah, so it depends. So we're sometimes looking at somewhere in like the $50,000, a year range. We have students that are closer to over $70,000 when they are programmed for out of district.
But those are kids that you think we could have the potential to keep here.
So there are some students that, if we had openings, I would like to review very closely. In fact, Mr. Ryan and I were just talking about 2 students we have at a BOCES class. They're doing very well there, and that's also a factor too. When a child has had difficulty and he or she begins to do well and be regulated, you often want to consider, is it the best move to bring the child to a different placement? But we just talked about 2 kids that we'd like to bring back. One student was in Maple Mere's program. He moved and then transferred back to the district. And when he'd come back, we'd filled the classroom. So that's when he went to a BOCES class. So we do have kids that I would closely review to bring back if we could.
Then we're talking space issues.
Yeah.
I know.
Right. And here's the thing. You could talk about, putting a class in another building, which is always a possibility. The only thing that kind of comes to mind for that is it's nice to have the classes when they're programmed together, because it helps to centralize the related services. Our OT, our PT, our speech are all then kind of right on hand. It's also good for collaboration and just between the classes. So to put a class in isolation at another building, I certainly am open to any conversation, but there would be points for consideration.
And I know just from visiting Mr. Ryan's classrooms, he's very protective of his kids. And these classrooms are amazing. I remember going in there, and one of the teachers in there was sitting down with a kid. I said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "We're teaching this child how to play." And I'm like, "You have to teach a child to play?" And she says, "Yes." And it kind of was an aha moment, because I'm like, wow.
Yeah, no, the work that's done in these classrooms and really with all of our special educators is pretty phenomenal. And I do know what you mean about Mr. Ryan being a little territorial about those classes.
Oops.
Did you want me to be done, Mike? I know I had a few
Nope.
more points.
Did I miss? I'm sorry.
All right, I just really,
My fault.
really quickly,
Oh,
I never
no.
get the microphone, so I'm like,
Apologize.
I don't like get it all out tonight. But if we're short on time, I'll wrap up.
You are perfectly fine.
Okay.
Take whatever time.
Okay.
Please keep
Okay.
going. My fault. My
Okay,
fault.
that's okay. I just want to, note a couple other things, just so you're aware, especially in cases where we're asking for additional staffing and so forth. forth, with regard to improvement services. So these are services that are provided outside of the CSE. They're part of that whole intervention piece. And so with the increased needs that we've seen with our students, we have been less able to provide the improvement services. So in some cases, we'll declassify a child coming out of preschool and we'll say, sometimes parents are nervous, what if, he or she doesn't do well? And so we'll say we'll monitor through improvement. We'll provide, 1 day a week of speech just to kind of keep an eye on things. This has been particularly difficult this year. I know many of the related service people in your buildings have talked to us about that they're really struggling to provide these improvement services. Now, these are not services we're obligated to provide. They are services, though, that I know parents and people really appreciate because they've told me that in other districts, this is not something, that's offered. So I know this is, just an area that if possible, I'd like to continue to be able to offer. I also just wanted to note too, with regard to contracted services, Don had mentioned there was, a question regarding some of the BOCES, the increases in the BOCES spending. So I just want to point out one major change for us is with our teacher of the deaf services. So Joanne Mayers, who was our teacher of the deaf through supplemental, retired last year in June. And so those services are contracted through BOCES now. And just to give you an idea of what that looks like financially, where Joanne might have been able to see a student 1 day a week for 30 minutes, in the neighborhood of maybe just over $6,000 for the year, that same service gets for over about $1,300 a year, that gets up to like $6,000. So the percent increase in using those services through BOCES is substantial.
Is that aidable at all?
We do get 60%. I don't know.
66%.
But it doesn't come back right away. Do I?
Yeah,
Next
another
year.
year.
I want to note too, in terms of the Office of Special Programs and the work that we've done, just with regard to our social emotional well-being of our staff. So every single one of these building principals, Chris and I, are always trying to look out for our staff. And people have come to us with, concerns for themselves, their parents, their families, that, they've had to face things that maybe they haven't had to face before. And one of the things that's been a tremendous help here in alleviating some of our staff stress is the additional support staff that we've hired. So I know, Joanne, I've worked very closely with you, and Karen, that firsthand, of all the, teacher aides. So I just want to, thank you for your support in that area because that's been a tremendous help. And the last thing I'll say with regard to these additional points is that around long COVID. So last July, guidance came out around long COVID. So students can be classified as having an other health impairment if they show signs of long COVID. And these are symptoms that are, existing well past when one may have recovered from having COVID. And with this, this can call for a change in services, the beginning of services, related services, other districts have begun to discuss this in their CSE and identify students this way. We have not yet, so I don't know at this point yet the impact that would have on the district. So I just want to make a note of that. All right, and I'll wrap it up here with some more of our new faces, students that have recently transferred to us, and I don't think you can find bigger smiles anywhere.
Do we have any of our kids using a Toby?
A Toby.
Toby, I used one of those in one of the classrooms where you stare at it and it moves the letters to make words.
Chris, I don't think
I
we
think it
have
was
anybody
over in
using that.
Glendale, I did it.
No, I mean, we have eye gaze equipment some of our students use, but
So what you need us to do is magically have classrooms added on to the end of the wings. Is about it.
that would be
I don't like
great.
it. Yeah, I don't like any of these options. Yeah.
Is there anything else I can answer for you?
I
Anything
want to
from
know
the
what's on
building?
your wish list. I mean, what do you see?
I just got it.
I know, but besides space, what is your biggest need going into September? I know
Or
that's a
theirs.
big question. Or theirs, I mean, what the,
Yeah, I mean, I look to my colleagues, they're in the buildings every day. I know that, I've talked with Mike and Don and Joanne about, staffing requests that in conjunction with the building principals we've asked for. That is probably the biggest ask right now. Unless you guys have anything else.
Not only do we have weird gaps in your progression, we have weird gaps between kids. On the job. Holding our own, but it's
Mr. Ryan?
Honestly, I'm just really grateful for the resources I'm with. Secret is the limitation we have in terms of space, but the amount of resources, whether that's funding, whether that's grounds team, reconfigured some rooms, putting common spaces right into our exceptional classrooms. And support people with personnel. Transfers coming in, we have roles, but I also feel really confident in terms of those roles. We're lucky to have kids here 5. We aren't guessing in terms of loss. We're having hybrid schedules, so I feel like having an understanding of where our kids are academically is a credit to the district. That we are having for initial referrals are not kids from remote academy. They're the kids from last year.
anybody have any other questions?
I guess I'd just like to really offer a very sincere thank you and gratitude to the work that all of you guys do. I don't think it's a secret that Sweet Home takes great pride in the care that we offer these students and our ability to do it as well as we do. And I think if we can continue offering that and maybe wish list a couple of these items from the magical wish list. I think it's something that, we're all as a district really interested in and really proud of. So thank you guys. And thank you for being here tonight too, with the whole crowd.
Couldn't ask for better colleagues. And as always, we appreciate your support and thank you very much. The other night, my son asked me, when I was talking about this presentation with my husband, he said, "Mom, who has the best special ed program in the area?"
Duh.
And I said Sweet Home. And he said, "So this is where, like, if a child had a disability, they should go to Sweet Home." And I said, "Without question."
We've heard of people moving into the
do.
district because we have such an amazing program and they've heard of it. So kudos.
That guy on the left-hand side of the screen, his mother interviewed districts before they moved here
Sure.
from Indiana and wanted to be in Sweet Home for that very reason.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
And I would just like to add one thing, if that's okay. I knew about Sweet Home's reputation for special education before I got here. And there's a reason why there's a wait list for students to come to Sweet Home. And it's because of Katie and Chris and the team. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes behind the scenes that parents aren't, they're involved in the process, but the amount of review and observation and analysis that goes into before even a recommendation comes before the committee is tremendous. And then you top the legalities on top of all of that as well. This isn't a program, it's law. And I think that needs to be said because there are so many steps that need to be followed in order to create an IEP, but then follow the IEP as well. And so just big kudos to you, to Chris, to everybody in the department and the team. And there's a reason why it works so well, and it's communication. And I think the communication is so strong and between all the parties that are involved, because there's a tremendous amount of people that are involved in the process as well. So thank you for all your work. I know how much it is, and you're doing a great job, so thank you.
So they can get home.
And you guys, if you would like to go home, otherwise,
You're welcome to stay. but
yes,
your
you're
families-
welcome to stay as well.
Families are higher priority, though. You heard that from me.
So thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Have a good night.
Amy, my coat. You look like
It's
you're
cold
freezing.
in here. It's cold.
They're working on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I sent down a message. I'm like,
I'm
"Can you please
freezing."
turn the air off, please.
I'm quite comfortable, but.
Okay.
So am I. That's why I was willing to give up the coat, but,
I'll be all right.
okay.
So just a couple, I know we've had a couple presentations, but I wanted to update the board on a few items. This week, as you know, last Wednesday, we went mask optional, as everyone did across New York State. It's important to note that the pandemic is still here, and we still have safety, all of our safety measures are in place, but it is mask optional now for anyone who enters a Sweet Home building during and after school hours. Also on buses, it's mask optional. But we've talked to the principals, we've had cabinet meetings. Anyone who wants to wear a mask needs to feel comfortable wearing one, and that's been a big theme because it's your choice, and we respect choice here at Sweet Home. So I was around buildings on Wednesday. We had a cabinet meeting. We talked to all the principals. It seemed to have gone very smooth last Wednesday. I've walked the high school quite a bit, and there are a lot of students still wearing masks, and we absolutely respect that choice. And so it's nice to have, I guess, for them to have that choice, but to know that they're in a safe environment as well, as far as emotional safety goes as well. We are continuing to provide masks. We have plenty of surgical and N95 masks here for anybody wishing to have one, and that is students and staff or anyone who enters our buildings. We are getting test kits by the day, as Don can attest to. We're not only talking about sending test kits home again in April, but maybe even beforehand, because we have so many on site. So the state, thank you to the governor's office and BOCES for continuing to provide the district with test kits home, and more will be going home soon. One change that is required, not really a change, but this was noted in the guidance. This was the only requirement in the new guidance that came out Wednesday, was that anyone who has tested positive for COVID, they can come back after 5 days, but they still must wear a mask days 6 through 10. So the principals know that, and they're working to enforce that as well. Masking for 10 days after exposure is strongly recommended. Testing on day 5 after exposure is strongly recommended. So they have definitely changed the language in the guidance from requirements to strongly recommended, with the purpose of continuing to keep students in school is really the focus of the guidance. We are continuing contact tracing efforts in the district as well. And so those safety measures will stay in place. Our ventilation will stay up to date. Distancing is still in place. We're encouraging parents to test at home, as well as asking them if there's an exposure, that getting permission to test at school. So all the buildings have tests. The requirement to test non-vaccinated employees is still in place, and so we're still doing that every Wednesday. We'll be encouraging hand hygiene, cough, sneeze etiquette as well. And of course, everybody gets their favorite text in the morning to encourage you to stay home if you are not feeling well. So not 5 a.m., 6
I
a.m.
appreciate the
So-
switch to 6.
We appreciate that.
And an email as well.
Are we having any trouble getting the MERV 13s to replace any ventilation things? It's just, hard to replace anything. 'cause
We replaced them in November. We're due to replace them again in April. We have them in stock and ready to go.
good.
We ordered enough for the whole year.
Good.
And it should be noted, we are, although we want to go, we love to see zeros. Our numbers are low, and they're the lowest they've been all year long. So even after the break, I think it was 5 the week after the break. Is actually one day where we didn't have any cases. And so with that being said, these measures are staying in place because we want to keep our numbers low or non-existent. Any questions on the new guidelines where we're?
Any idea when we'll get the kids back in the cafeterias or anything?
So as long as we're going to stay with the distancing because we still are close contacting students. We'll continue to monitor numbers. A lot of the requirements are gone and it should, but notification of close contacts is still a measure that's important and wants to be on the books.
So as PTA start thinking about, dances they're going to have and things, are the kids allowed to come back in to have those dances or
Yeah.
what's the?
We are actually just was talking with Mr. Polino last week. His building, Willow Ridge, is going to do a fair in 2 weeks, I think. And so we said yes. We want to say yes because I think, as you heard, getting back to some of the norms and some of the events that the kids can really look forward to is important. And so with the mask options coming off and our numbers being where they are, we are definitely looking to say yes to these events. Just a reminder that we are, and I have another transportation update in a minute, but we're still looking, and talking quite a bit in the transportation department about next year. We are concerned about drivers and the numbers we have. We're very concerned about retirements that are popping up as well. So we are looking at plans that could change start times, that could introduce walking of short distances in the district to free up some runs. And as we get a better handle on enrollment numbers for next year and where our drivers are and when they plan to retire, we'll have a better idea of where we can go and what we need to do to make sure that our runs are taken care of.
I'm sure you have a date in mind. When do you have to make that decision by?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Joanne, but there's a date for retirement notifications in the contract, so.
So for administrators, it's 6 months notice. Teachers, which could be at any point in the year. For teachers, it's a February 1 deadline. So I think we've gotten our teacher retirements for the year. And service employees, it's a 60-day notice. And again, that one's not tied to a particular time of the year, just a 60 days notice. So we're continuing to see service employee retirements, but I think we've seen our teacher retirements for the year, absent something unexpected happening.
So date-wise by?
I would say in the next 30 days that we've really got to hammer this done. I would think
That's probably fair.
If you have a flyer for like the bus driver announcement, yeah, my dad wants to hang one up and I want to hang one up in my apartment complex because I
Awesome.
think there's a couple
Yeah.
people who might be interested.
Kaylee, we'll get you one. I'll
Okay.
email you one.
I try and recruit people from the hospital. My patients come in. I say, well, what do you do for a living? I'm retired. Well, I got a place you can go.
Yes, that's awesome.
I do that at work too.
Yeah,
Every time
see,
they
we
say
all
I'm
try and-
retiring. I'm like, you want to drive a bus?
Drive a bus.
What is the current hourly rate for the bus drivers?
So the starting rate is about $19.50 an hour. It's expected to go up with a new contract or July 1. But we are, I think we'll know our driver retirements probably by the end of April. But some of them though, because of the way that when their start dates, when they were hired by the district and they hit their milestones, aren't necessarily timed with the school calendar. But I think we'll probably see the bulk of them by the end of April.
And then I just wanted to give an update on a presentation I saw. Joanne and I just attended the New York State Council of School Superintendents conference, and we came back today. But one of the interesting things one of the sessions that I went to was on electric busing. And so Union Endicott piloted an electric bus to kind of look at what the costs would be and to determine where we're going with them. But the governor has proposed by 2027 that all new bus purchases are zero emission buses, and by 2035, all buses should be zero emissions. That 2027 date, even for Union Endicott, who's already kind of piloted one bus, is a little scary because that's 5 years away to start doing this. But it's good to start talking about it now as we look to move forward. So they like I said, they provided the people in attendance with some cool information. The cost of a diesel bus runs anywhere between $125,000 and $200,000, where an electric bus is $350,000 to $425,000. Now, the aid structure, as you know, as you're familiar with, is in place for electric, but I think lobbying efforts are going to start because that upfront cost for an electric bus is so much higher than a diesel. But as we look into operating costs, diesel bus is about 40 to 50 cents per mile, where an electric bus is 18 to 22 cents a mile. So some of the money is made up there. And then maintenance, there's a lot less parts on an electric bus than there is on a diesel bus. And so on each bus, you're saving about 20 to 50% in maintenance costs.
How much is it to install all those things to power it up?
So I'm going to get to that in a second, but Union Endicott figured if they were going to change their entire bus fleet around, and they're about 3,500 students, similar, it could be anywhere between $1 and $1.4 million to tool it. Yeah. But that would be aidable, which is nice, and so that's a consideration.
Did anybody give you an idea of how long the batteries last on these things?
So
On the slide?
yep. So they did say about 120 miles they would last, but there are conditions. Weather is one of them, and in cold weather, there needs to be a heating element of some sort to get the battery up to speed. So 120 miles is about the average range, they would say. Now,
And the other end of it is a lifespan on the batteries?
so they're still testing that, and they didn't really have great information on the lifespan of the battery yet.
Okay.
But because this is year one of the pilot, I think we're going to get more. And they said, they'll talk to us about it.
All right, I know, the reason I asked that is this, a number of years ago, the state decided they were going to do compressed natural gas in all their cars. They
Yep.
went through and built all the infrastructure and everything else. And when they hit the end of the lifespan on the tanks, they threw the cars away because it wasn't worth replacing them.
Right,
And
right.
That's my fear here.
Yeah. And I think with less parts, like I said, the maintenance cost goes down, but battery replacement is definitely something that they need to study a little more.
Have to watch that.
Yep.
How many buses do we buy roughly a year? Do we put in to buy?
Say again, I'm sorry.
How many buses do we tend to try to replace each year?
This year, we're going to replace 3 large buses, 1 small passenger bus, and 1 small wheelchair bus. So generally in the 4 to 6 range.
Thank you. That's
And that number that Mr. Genestri had up there is pretty spot on for the large buses. It's about $135,000 a bus.
Do they hold the same number of kids?
The
The
large
buses,
buses as opposed to the electric bus?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Do they
They're
have-
similar in size, yes. Yep. So some of the ideas that they had is a partnership with your utility company to tool the garage the way it needs to be done. The utility company, according to this pilot, is responsible for providing the electric to the facility. So they would incur some of the infrastructure cost about the pipeline to get the electric here. But we got to discuss the number of buses, the routes, how the garage is configured, that sort of thing. Each bus has a battery capacity, and drain is determined by miles, hills, and cabin heating. So I think, mileage is, we're about 15 square miles, I think, as a district. So that's helpful. No hills really to report of, but the cold weather is definitely a consideration when it comes to battery life. You can tool your garage for fast charging, but that's more expensive. And then there is a trick to charging. You want to charge at the right rates, But some in partnership with the, there might be an opportunity to what they call vehicle to grid, where if the bus is idle and it has power in the batteries, you can sell the power back, and usually at a better rate because the utility company wants the electric back from you. So cheaper for us to take the power, and then we get a better rate to sell it back if the bus is idle, like in the summer. So we could actually be in a situation where you charge the bus every day over the summer and then sell it back if power is needed to the utility company. So it's another chance to offset some of those upfront costs.
Is a solar farm
So
something that
You know,
we
actually-
could look into?
actually, Don and I had that discussion, and I think our next step would be to, if, in moving forward, is we take on this exploration, I'll say, is to partner with a utility company and see what's the best way to get electric here.
Yeah, we talked once about doing it for the entire roof here.
Yeah.
I can't remember, remember the number of acres? It was a,
I don't remember that. It's interesting because, with the electric buses, and getting the initial cost kind of at 1.2 or $1.4 million that you had said, Mike. Remember we were just from a timing standpoint in our debt service, I don't see our next capital improvement project until probably 2027. 2027, maybe even 2028. So from a cost perspective, I know that we're putting some money away in the capital reserve fund that we talked about tonight for replacement of the turf. We may have to kind of start to think about this as well. In addition, as you were talking, Mike, I was thinking if you come off the 990, that first exit onto, I think it's Audubon Park, well, whatever it is there, into the campus, you go right by our transportation building, and just on the hill, there is a huge solar farm right there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's worth a conversation with the University of Buffalo to be able to kind of do that and talk about that. I know that they are very amenable when we do finish up our renovations over here at the transportation center. In May, we're taking our fuel tanks out of the ground. And we have to figure out a way to fuel buses, and they've been very amenable to allow us to fuel them at their station over there. So we're forging a relationship that way. I don't know if it's the same folks that would deal with the solar initiative going on over there, but there's solar panels all over that university, and I'd be interested to see if, how A, they got started, and B, if there's a way for us to potentially partner. I don't know enough about it.
Did we have one on the roof? Somebody said we used to have one up on our roof.
I've
Is there
seen
one? 'Cause
it.
I think I've heard people
I
say.
think we've
there's
done one
upstairs.
to, like, it was part of a weather station at one
Oh,
point in
okay.
time. I think, yeah. But
So,
stuff to think about more.
yeah. I mean, like we said, the timeline is a little scary, but it, this is an initiative that seems to be picking up some steam. So some lessons I learned in the presentation, there are definitely high upfront costs, but the maintenance costs are lower, less amount of parts to maintain. Aid is available for electric busing. There are also federal grants, other grants that might be at play here, which is nice. And so, we want to start thinking and planning for this now because, like I said, well, I think 2027, it's not that far away. So,
do utilities have anything? I know a handful of years ago, I replaced my furnace. They gave me for high efficiency furnace and air conditioning. I got like $1,500 back on it or something like that.
and I think there might be like, I want to say NYSERDA grant or something along those lines they were talking about. But there definitely, as this picks up steam, it seems to be there's more funding sources that come into play. So I'll look that up. But there were a bunch of other grants they listed as potential to offset some of the upfront costs.
Okay.
They also said that they feel like as demand starts to go up, as long as they can get supply, which is an issue, that the price of the buses will start to come down. And so I think it's probably a good time if you're in the electric bus manufacturing
They
business.
just got to make the demand start going up.
That's right. That's right.
But on that timeline too, I mean, you figure we've got 55-ish large buses. 25 smallish buses. Like, that's a pretty aggressive time schedule.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to start to think about it
You
sooner.
wouldn't normally have replaced the fleet in that time frame, I don't think.
No, generally, we would replace the fleet over about a 12 or 13-year period. So we're gonna really have to be thoughtful about this and kind of game plan. I don't know if I'd imagine it's gonna stick at some fashion or other, but, it's just a matter of starting to think about it now, quite honestly.
I also want to throw out, to me, exciting, probably to Don, very scary. I think this is the first of what's going to be many mandates or requirements along these lines in different areas of greening districts. So we might want to try to anticipate where this is going in other directions as well.
Yeah.
Because I imagine that we're only going to be seeing more stuff
Agree.
like this.
The other option too, sorry.
Yeah.
Just the other option would be, rather than, because of that lifespan, Scott, in my circles, rather than purchasing the buses, leasing. If it's a 4 or 5, as opposed to what we do now, 13-year, if it's a 4 or 5-year shelf life, it's almost like an iPad. It makes more sense to, lease them and then lease to maybe potentially own and then trade in and then kind of keep up our fleet that way, as opposed to outright purchasing them.
Makes sense.
Because it's, 3 times the cost of a normal bus, just about.
Yeah.
I already touched on this, but like I said before, we plan to do the similar over April break as we did over February break with the test kit distribution. I will, we're, like I said, we have plenty of tests in the district to hand out to staff and students.
What's the have you checked the expiration?
Some of
date
them
on it?
were February,
'Cause I know some
but
of
we're
them
getting,
were coming back February.
Yeah, some of them were February, but we
got a new shipment today. I
got a new
think.
shipment in. We did our best to hand out the majority of the February ones before February break. But we'll keep an eye on it and make sure.
And very happy to discuss that the lease for the North Amherst Community Center was approved by the Amherst Town Board at their February 28th meeting. Supervisor Culpa and I have talked quite a few times in the last couple of weeks about it, but the language, it's been approved, but the language he said is in the perfection stage. So, there's, like I said, it's been approved. And I know now that they're, as you've heard in the past, they're starting to talk about a committee being formed by the Amherst Town Rec to solidify plans and look at services. And then hopefully by the fall of 2022, we're opening with some of those services that we've promised to our community. So very excited about this. And I know it's getting around with the staff. And I think Joanne talked about it on a faculty meeting with the middle school the other day, and how excited they are as well that we're going to have a strong presence in North Amherst.
I was doing my round for the annual safety updates for the district. So we were able to share this information at the faculty meetings with, I've been to the high school, the middle school, Ready, and Maplemere. And there's tremendous response. I don't know that as much as we've talked about it, like almost, it seems like we've not stopped talking about it for almost a year plus. If you weren't paying attention or following, it seemed to be very much new information for many of our teachers. And they were very pleased and excited to learn about the prospect of having this opportunity for our kids at the north end of our district, and really felt it was like to thank the board, to thank the district for pursuing this option for our kids. We're excited for it. Wanting to know when it's going to open, what kind of services it's going to have. Like lots of questions came from this topic.
Very excited.
Would you ask Mary Diana if she wants a board representative on that committee?
Absolutely. Sure. And then I did have a meeting on Friday with Supervisor Culpa and North Tonawanda Mayor Austin Tylek to discuss neighborhood enhancements in the Willow Ridge and Parkview areas of the district. They are working with a town planning firm right now to enhance walkways, roadways, waterways, parks, recreation, tie, I think they're looking at, there's a piece of land in between the canal called Bark Park, kind of tied North Tonawanda to the Amherst side as well. So that's why the North Tonawanda mayor was there. And they are running a March 15th community forum on Zoom to gather input. And I think they're going to be at the Willow Ridge event in the next 2 Fridays, I think it is, coming up, to kind of pass out flyers and really looking to gain a lot of community input on what they'd like to see out of their parks, recs, and roadways. So again, just I thank the supervisor for including us in on these discussions. We talked to him about, obviously there are busing concerns, issues in those areas. The boulevard is very busy. And so improving walkways around Willow Ridge is extremely important for us, especially if we consider that some of our students may have to walk that are really in close distance to the school. So they are looking at safety issues that came up. They want better, they want improvements to the boulevard so buses have easier passing through on the boulevard, less accidents, that sort of thing. So very excited again to partner with them and discuss what that means for our Willow Ridge Parkview areas.
Mr. Genestri, we haven't had an opportunity to talk, but somebody from Supervisor Culpa's team reached out to me today. I believe that we're going to schedule for this project a community forum on Saturday, April 2nd, right here in this room. And then they're also looking for kind of almost like a gallery walk of ideas that they're trying to open it up to residents in the community. So they're looking for a space really for that whole following week during the evening time. So we're talking about Dexter Terrace right now to be able to have them utilize some space in that area. And we just traded emails today, but more to follow. It seems like it's a pretty cool project. So
How do we get a link to that?
I'll send them the flyer.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
It's during our board meeting.
Oh, well,
I know.
And then I just want to give you an update for next week. We're going to have an update on our February 28th District DEI Committee for you. We learned a few new best practices at NISCUS this weekend, which was fantastic, and a couple of great speakers. And then we will give you an update on the development of the mission and vision statement for the DEI committee and where we are with policy. And that is
it.
yes.
So, all right, that concludes the superintendent's report. I see I won't go through them all, upcoming events, but I just want to take note. This weekend is the school musical, the high school musical. So if anybody can get to that, it'd be great. I want to kind of break from what we do now because I know Roman has to leave shortly. So can we go ahead and just review your informational ideas?
I actually don't have much to
Don't have
report
anything.
today, mainly because I know that we're going to have members of student government show up to our next board meeting. So anything I say today will likely be brought up then.
Okay.
So
All right.
I have, I don't have to leave right away.
Okay. We just want to make sure we get you out on time.
Yeah.
All right. So we will go.
Unfortunately, I don't have much to report right now, but
Okay. We'll
you'll
wait for
all-
next week.
you'll all hear it next week and get to meet
Sounds
a lot of the
good.
people I work with.
All right, so that takes us to new business. We'll be reviewing, and we do this every year, rules for use of optical scan voting machines. Any questions? We do this yearly, right?
yes.
I think I've seen it before. The proposed amendments to the district's 2017 Capital Improvement Reserve Fund, which we heard about. C is the annual public hearing and district vote, policy 1610. Okay, and D, wow, special education. I had 191 pages that I have not gotten through yet, but I will have them done by next week. E is our monthly financials. F is disposal of obsolete property. We have a 18-passenger van and 75 two-way bus radios, and then some commissary equipment, correct? Yes. G is our revised policy, second reading, 1410. Any questions? H is our revised policy, 1410, first readings. I is Erie One BOCES Board of Education nominees, and I think we got letters under our communication.
There's 3 nominees and there's 3 spaces.
3
right?
spaces, yes.
Thought we had
The
4
four
nominees.
4 nominees.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Four
I only
nominees.
saw.
But 2 of them are from one district.
Can they be?
No, well,
That's
only
what
one
I
of them.
wondered, yeah.
Yeah, only
2
one of them.
nominees
appealed,
are
yeah.
from one district.
Okay,
They can both be nominated, only one
right,
can be
but only
elected.
one can be
Yeah.
elected. And J is our appointments for our district clerk. Ta-da. Any questions on any of those? All right, next that takes us to informational items, and let's start with you, Peter.
Sure, I'll be brief today. Amy's saying. I just have a couple of things. One, over the past week, I've attended some legislative meetings. I've met with Assemblywoman McMahon, Assemblywoman Wallace, Senator Ryan, and we have Senator Kennedy on Thursday. And that's just this week. That's the BOCES meetings. And then I'll get into the NICET meetings in the week to follow that. So a lot of meetings over the next couple of weeks. With the BOCES meeting, the 2 main focuses we had is on BOCES aidable salary cap. Still using the formula from 1990, I believe it is.
92, I think. Close enough, yeah.
And Mike Capuana, our assistant superintendent of instructional service, said that is costing the 19 component districts about $2.4 million a year. I don't know what Sweet Homes Fund is in that, cut is in that, but BOCES is asking that aid gets
Bumped up.
adjusted to 2020 wages. The other thing is APPR, and this is a NICET thing along with the BOCES, is having that suspended for the 21-22 school year. At least the APPR that is tied to student standardized testing. And there is a Senate bill on the floor by Senator Meyer that actually asks for this, so it would suspend APPR scores for standardized testing and adjust the tenure area, because I know that affects, APPR scores affect tenure. Assemblyperson Wallace basically said that since there's a new governor who likes teachers, that maybe they should look at completely throwing that out. So that is something that is on the minds of the Assembly and the Senate. It was, many people believe, put in as a deterrent to teachers, that tying it to standardized scores. As Marianne said in our schedule, we're going to the play Saturday night, so I'm looking forward to it. And I just wanted to congratulate all of our winter athletes. Women's basketball team made the sectional final. We had numerous track and field athletes place at the state level in the indoor track and field. So just wanted to congratulate all of our winter athletes.
I was going to bring this up, but you said it. There's all kinds of coverage in the Amherst Bee. It's just so neat to see our kids, how they succeed. Yeah, good kids. Okay, thank you. Scott?
I'm going to save most of the stuff for next week. I just got one quick announcement. When we do the resolution stuff this year, as part of the convention, we have that. I'm going to be the chair for the resolutions
Wow.
statewide.
Ooh.
Congratulations.
They're not doing it, hopefully not virtual again.
They can do the resolutions. It's going to be done virtual. They already decided that.
They
Yeah,
already,
yeah, they already made the decision.
okay. All right.
That's it for now.
That's it. Thank you. Kaylee?
I attended the second DEI committee meeting, but I think maybe I'll also talk about that next week after that presentation. Next week seems like it's going to be a really great meeting. Riveting.
All right, thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I just want to mention that Eric Duvall, he was the assistant editor at the Buffalo News. He passed away in February, and he was also a Sweet Home graduate of class of 2000. So, you know, our condolences to his family. And you know, want to make sure that got mentioned. And then attended the Willow Ridge PTO meeting. And, you know, I'm happy to report, it's already was mentioned that, you know, we're able to start to get back to some normal events. In particular, the February Frolics is now being held in March, but it's nice that we're able to. March Madness, maybe it can be called, but you know, that's as we mentioned, a fair type of event. So it's nice to have that, you know, us be able to bring the students and the parents back, and so and I'll save the rest till for next week.
For next week. Okay, thank you. Amy?
I don't have much, just want to piggyback on what Peter said. Congratulations to our winter athletes. There were some very exciting seasons for many of our athletes. So kudos to them. Other than that, I will reserve my rest of my stuff till next week.
As will I, so we'll move on. All right, that takes, go ahead. Absolutely.
I also wanted to mention that our thoughts and prayers are going out to our friends in Williamsville today. You know, I can't imagine, and hopefully, you know, what they're going through and losing two seniors.
As well as Lancaster. I
Yeah,
mean, we've
yeah.
lost 4 kids in the last week.
Yeah. And I did reach out to their superintendent today to offer any supports that we can. He thanked us for that. He said it is a devastating day in the Williamsville district, and just wanted to mention to him that, you know, publicly for the record, that they have our full support. And if there's anything that they need, we offered counseling, of course, but anything else in support, that we'll be here for them. Thank you for
Great,
that.
thank you for reaching
Wendy
out
saying
to them.
that. Yep.
Thank you. All right, so back to another open session. No, okay, we'll move on. Okay, that takes us to personnel, both teaching and administrative, as well as service. Any questions? All right, and this takes us to adjournment. I need a motion to go to, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'd like you to make a motion for executive session for negotiations and personnel.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And that concludes our meeting. Thank you.